Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation tonight, which is called Earth Day, the Past, Present, and Future of Environmental Activism. My name is Gay Strandemo, and I'm a librarian at Waunakee Public Library. And this program is funded tonight by Beyond the Page. And what might that be, you might ask? Beyond the Page is a permanent endowment held by the Madison Community Foundation that annually funds humanities programming for Dane County libraries. And we certainly do benefit from their generosity. Our speaker tonight, Tia Nelson. She's a climate change program director for the Outrider Foundation. She's internationally recognized as a tireless champion for environmental stewardship and climate change education. She spent 17 years with the Nature Conservancy in government relations as a policy advisor for Latin America, and later as the first director of the Global Climate Change Initiative. For this work, she received the EPA's Climate Protection Award in the year 2000. She returned home to Wisconsin to serve as executive secretary to the Wisconsin Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, which included a gubernatorial appointment and co-chair of Wisconsin's task force on global warming. And she directs Outrider Foundation's climate program. We're going to see a video that has been done by Outrider, but before we do that, Tia would like to say a few words about it first.
Oh, thank you so much, Gay, for your kind introduction, for your programming, and for all the important work and role that libraries play in our communities. I'm really grateful to be here today. We're going to watch in a few minutes a 7-minute film that I produced for the anniversary of the 50th Earth Day. And as you might imagine, it's a personal story for me. It was certainly a significant milestone in environmental history, and of course quite important to me to honor my father and his legacy as the founder of Earth Day. He's was just a little boy from a little town in northern Wisconsin in Polk County. He was born and raised in Clear Lake, and he had a really big dream, and he discovered that aspiration and dream as a very young boy. Nature was his playground in Clear Lake. His parents were very involved in civic matters in town and in the area and in the state. My grandmother working in the suffrage movement, my grandfather who was a doctor, a great progressive who took my father when he was 10 years old. They drove in a Model T Ford from Clear Lake to Amory, which is the county seat of Polk County, which my father jokingly calls the budding metropolis of Polk County. And if you've been there, you understand why that was quite funny. And when he was 10 years old, Dr. Anton Nelson, my grandfather, drove my father in that Model T Ford to see Robert Follett Jr. give a speech from the back of a train, a whistle-stop train tour of Wisconsin. And you can see this image above me here. We're reliving that train tour in 1968 as a family. And I'm about 12 then, so just 2 years older than Papa was when he went and saw Bob La Follette give this long, inspiring, moving speech. And my father sat on his father's shoulders and he watched that speech, and he was quite inspired and quite moved. And he saw public service as an honorable calling. He saw Bob La Follette as a man committed to progressive traditions that looked out for the well-being of all of the citizens of Wisconsin. And driving home after that speech, my grandfather asked my father what he thought, and my father paused. Keep in mind, he was just 10 years old and had watched this long political speech from this great orator. And he announced to his father in that moment, in that car, on his way back from Amory to Clear Lake, that when he grew up, he wanted to be a United States Senator like Bob La Follette Jr. and help the citizens of Wisconsin. And then he paused and he said he had a big worry, one big worry. And that worry was that Bob La Follette will have solved all the problems by the time he grew up, and there'd be nothing for him to do. And turned out not to be the case, as you might imagine. And my father went on to be elected to the state senate and then elected governor and on to the United States Senate. As governor, he became known as the conservation governor for a really bold vision to protect the lands and waters and wild spaces of Wisconsin. And he took to Washington that environmental ethos and struggled for many years. And this is an important part of the story from my perspective. He struggled for many years to find a way to create the political will for action around these big environmental challenges: clean air, clean water, conservation. And it was a long journey. He encountered many obstacles. He experienced many defeats and failures. But ultimately, in 1969, after going to Santa Barbara, California, to inspect what was then the largest oil spill in American history on the California coast, he got in an airplane to fly home, and he picked up a Ramparts magazine, and the cover of that magazine was a story about how college campus teach-ins on the Vietnam War had changed the political narrative around the morality of the Vietnam War. And he thought to himself, that's it. That's a great idea. I'm going to call for a teach-in on the environment. And I'm going to ask all the teachers across the country on all the college campuses and in all the K through 12 schools to set aside a single day, just one day, to talk about whatever environmental issues are meaningful to them and their communities. And that dream, culminating in with that idea, was successful beyond my father's wildest imagination. So I wanted to honor that story. I wanted to remind people that individual action matters, that my father's journey to this idea of Earth Day and the success of that, where 20 million people gathered on that first Earth Day, the largest secular event in American history, 1970, April 22nd. I wanted to remind people how powerful individual action was. Not just my father's perseverance, but the fact that it was successful because people responded to that call to action. They responded in a way that made sense to them and their communities. They talked about whatever was meaningful to them, and there were concerts, there were tree plantings, there were kids who picked up garbage at their school, there were cookie sales to protect a local park, there were protests, there were innumerable activities that came from the grassroots and individual action that were responsive in the communities across this country. And that's what made it so successful. So I wanted to honor that. That's the past. I wanted to honor my father. I wanted to honor that story. But in making this film, I wanted to also make it relevant to the present moment, in which we face the greatest environmental challenge in human history, which is climate change, and remind people that 1970, I mean, the 60s were a very divisive time in American history. And I wanted to remind people that Earth Day was successful because it was bipartisan, it was multi-generational, and my father's call to action was one that incorporated a very broad sense of social justice, something that I don't think the environmental community really embraced until much later. And I think it's an important element of being an advocate for everyone's right to breathe clean air and drink clean water, and to have open space, to recreate and to protect the places that are special to us, that define a lot about the character of Wisconsin. So I wanted to remind people that we are living in challenging times, but 1970 was a pretty challenging time too. And Earth Day was successful because of this idea of building bridges across political and generational divides, through a lens of justice. And so what I'm most deeply grateful for is I managed to convince Varshini Prakash, the youth activist and co-founder of the Sunrise Movement, who's been a big force behind the Green New Deal, which is obviously a very, very progressive liberal response to climate change and environmental challenges. And Bob Inglis, who is a former congressman, a Republican congressman from one of the reddest congressional districts in America, and an evangelical Christian. And I recruited Bob and Varshini to join me in telling my father's story and making it relevant to this moment in contemporary times. And I'm deeply grateful to both of them. They have different ideas about how to respond to the challenges before us. But what was important to me was not what they thought the policy response would be. What was important to me was that these two people who represented different generations, different political ideologies, came united to say, united, we can solve this. And the history matters. It's relevant today. And by pausing and contemplating that message, where we are, where we need to go, we can envision a brighter future. And so I'm deeply grateful to Varshini and Bob for joining me and making this film. And we've really had a good time doing it. I just couldn't be more pleased or grateful. And perhaps now, Gay, is a good time to roll the film, which is approximately 7 minutes. Let's take a look.
All right, I'm going to share the screen now.
Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty while forgetting about the worst environments in America. Our goal is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all human beings and all other living creatures. Our goal is a decent environment in its broadest and deepest sense, and it will require a long, sustained political, moral, ethical, and financial commitment far beyond any commitment ever made by any society in the history of man.
My name is Tia Nelson. I am the daughter of Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day. My father was an extraordinary dad. He was an extraordinary leader. Growing up as his daughter, it was mostly a great privilege, but also I felt a heavy sense of duty to public service and to making a difference with my life. I work for the Outrider Foundation. Our goal is to educate people about big global challenges like climate change. One of my favorite quotes from my father was delivered on the eve of the first Earth Day in 1970. He said, ecology is a big science,
not a narrow one. It's a big concept. And it is concerned with all the ramifications of all the relationships of all living creatures to each other and their environment.
So when he talked about the environment, he talked about ecology and environment in the broadest sense, in the most inclusive sense. That idea resonated with students across the country. Collectively, they made a difference that was unforeseeable.
This movement and this fight is about all of us, because what is more fundamental than the air that we breathe, than water, than the soil that we stand on, than the land that we love? What is more fundamental to every single one of us than that? My name is Varshini Prakash. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I am one of the co-founders of Sunrise Movement. We are building a movement of young people all across this nation to stop the climate crisis and create millions of good jobs for our generation in the process. And when I began looking back into what the first Earth Day was like, what it meant, the level of people who got involved, the kind of political action, I think for me, Earth Day now is about getting back to our roots.
My father was brilliant at working across the aisle to build consensus. He knew when to compromise, he knew when to stick to his principles. Think of all of the important environmental laws that were passed after that first Earth Day, and they were passed with significant support from both parties.
For 6 years, I said that climate change was nonsense, in as much as I represented Greenville-Spartanburg, South Carolina, probably one of the reddest districts, the reddest state in the nation. That was the end of the inquiry for me. So I admit that's fairly ignorant, but that's the way it was for 6 years. So I'm bobbingless, and I run an outfit called republicen.org, where convincing conservatives that they're really good on climate and that they've got the answer. It's free enterprise innovation. My son, the eldest of our 5 kids, came to me. He was voting for the first time because he just turned 18. And he said to me, Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment. It's the first of a 3-step metamorphosis for me. Step 2 was going to Antarctica with the science committee, seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. Step 3 was another science committee trip. It's there that at a stopover at the Great Barrier Reef, great blessing there was meeting an Australian climate scientist named Scott Heron, and just being inspired by his faith to act on climate change.
When Bob spoke about climate change while serving in the United States Congress, he was primaried and he lost his election. He was attacked for speaking the words climate change. This was a transformative moment in his life and led to him dedicating his whole career today to addressing the climate change challenge.
For young people growing up in this country, we have been defined by the climate crisis. People who have been born after the year 2000 have never lived a year on this planet that wasn't one of the hottest years on record. We are the climate generation. And so now, at a young age, we have realized that if our politicians aren't going to do something about this problem, then we have to take matters into our own hands.
Through leadership of people like Varshini, the youth movement has been energized in the last year in ways that resemble what was happening almost 50 years ago when the first Earth Day occurred.
There comes a place where activism drives even the crustiest old-timer to decide to get involved.
I don't think there's any other issue viewed in its broadest sense, which is as critical to mankind as the issue of the quality of the environment in which we live.
Environmentalism is not a partisan issue. Environmentalism is a quality of life issue for all of us.
You know, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think we're going to solve climate change. It's going to be that conservatives come together with progressives to figure out we're literally in this together.
This is about not just changing light bulbs, this is about changing our politics. And if anything, we will be successful because we do it together.
I want the youth of today to know that I have done everything that I can to ensure on the 100th anniversary of Earth Day, we are celebrating a brighter future. We're at a critical moment in history. We have an opportunity to address the greatest environmental challenge of our time.
Are we able? Yes. Are we willing? That's the unanswered question.
There, but what a wonderful film.
You can find the film on Outrider's website, outrider.org/Earth Day will take you straight there. We have lots of great content on our website, Climate Science 101, the history of climate change. But you can find the film there, and you'll get a bit of higher quality streaming. It's also on YouTube. So thank you for sharing that. And so I think in seeing the film, the viewers have a better picture of what I meant when I talked about the importance of bringing together different voices, different generations, different political persuasions to work together on big environmental challenges. And so I'm very proud of the film, and as I said, very grateful. I'm happy at this moment, Gay, to take this any way you like. I can talk more about the history, but I'd love to hear questions from
Sure.
the audience or from you.
I'll give the audience their choice. You can ask a question in the chat, or you can unmute and ask a question of Tia.
I'm happy either. Who has the first question?
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Michelle. I've seen you talk before, and it's really nice that you gave this presentation. I do live in Waunakee. Is this movie a new movie? I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad. Yes, I made it for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. It debuted, the Smithsonian Institute debuted it at the Earth Optimism event in April of this year. And it's been shown across the country, and you can find it at outrider.org or on YouTube as well.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to, I think if each one of us does our little part, you know, it seems to me such a big calling, you know, that if each one of us does our little part, you know, I think that's really good. And next year when we get together, or whenever we get together, people can get together, I think that'll be better too.
Yeah. Well, I did a lot of media interviews for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day this year. And one of the things I say, remind people, which I mentioned earlier in the program, you know, Earth Day was successful beyond my father's wildest dreams because individuals responded to his call to action. He never could have imagined the outcome. Could Rosa Parks had known that the simple act of quiet defiance, of saying the word no, when asked to move to the back of the bus in 1963-ish, I think, maybe 64, could she have known that she would change the trajectory of the civil rights movement with that simple act? Surely not. Could Greta Thunberg, to make it more contemporary, could Greta Thunberg, a child in Sweden who suffered from great social phobias, who has Asperger's, and decided to, in her anxiety around climate change, simply sit and not say a word, just sit with a sign of protest in front of the Swedish parliament. Could she have known that she was going to launch a global youth movement on climate change that would change the conversation the country was having, the world was having? Rosa Parks couldn't have known, Greta couldn't have known, my father couldn't have known. They simply acted from a place of principle and something that was important to them, from a place of values, with a sense of determination and honor, and they changed the course of history. One person. One person.
One at a time.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, Tia, and it says, thank you for your film and service. I remember the first Earth Day as a young Girl Scout in Milwaukee. We've come a long way, but it seems that there's many more challenges.
Yes, well, I think my father would often reflect, the challenges of protecting the environment and pursuing greater balance between the human species and the natural world. That battle is never won. It is an enduring daily journey. It's not a destination. We never get to check the box and say that's done. It is something that we work for every day of our lives. The human species has a uniquely powerful impact on the other species and planetary health. And I when I was younger, perhaps surely more naive, I occasionally use the expression, save the planet, which I now think is quite silly. The planet, I believe, will do just fine. It's been around 6 billion years, and the human species is altering it in unimaginable and tragically harmful ways. But the planet has been through a lot. The question is, can we, the human species, have a relationship with the natural world that is sustainable, that allows our species to thrive? And that is a journey that will never end. As my father says in the film, it requires a long, sustained effort. And fighting for clean air and clean water, addressing the existential threat of climate change. These are big, big challenges. We can meet them, though. We know what the solutions are. And creating the social and political will for action is really the challenge. We know what we need to do. We just need to do it. But we'll always have that tension between a finite planet and the human species' appetite to use and consume it. And if we can rethink our relationship with this limited resource base, and how we use those resources, and how we respect those resources, how we consume those resources, how we think about the world and our relationship with it, and see ourselves as on parity with the natural world, then I think we can build a brighter future if we think of it in that way. Other questions? Who has another question? What about you, Gay? Do you have any?
Well, actually,
writing for this, or do you have any thoughts to share or questions to ask?
Yes, actually, I was thinking about plastics. and how so much pollution and destruction has happened from plastics. And I know there's been bans in some states, at least for a while, against plastic bags and such. How are we ever going to replace all the plastic that we need to replace? It's just become such a feature of convenience and marketing and production.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and I think about that a lot. You'll find what I think is a really good video and short word-based article wrap around it on Outrider's website. We produced a video in a collaboration with the Years Project on single-use plastic, and I think it's it's a really good example of the disconnect between how we as humans think about and interact with the natural world. I mean, think about it. We're taking, we're using petroleum-based energy to make a petroleum-derived, largely, there are some substitutes now, but plastic is made out of petroleum. It's made with fossil fuels. And we think nothing of buying a water bottle, and which might, be in our hands and serving our purposes of getting water, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, couple hours if we're put it in our car while we went on a drive. And then we say we've thrown it away when there is no away, right? I mean, there is no away. You don't throw things away. You put them somewhere else. And then there they are. And in the case of plastics, they can last for hundreds of years. And something I didn't know when I first started studying this, get this, when those plastics decay and break down, they again emit greenhouse gases. So we burn fossil fuels to make a petroleum-derived product. We use it for a few minutes or a few hours, and then we put it somewhere else, and it begins to decay, and it emits again greenhouse gases, to say nothing of turning into smaller particles of waste that is toxic to other species. And yet we've seen it as convenient or our right, and I do everything humanly. I have multiple reusable water bottles. I love the Swell bottles. I'm only because they keep my water cold for 24 hours and my coffee warm for 12. And I've got one that fits in my knapsack and one that fits in the car. And the quality of the water, out of my tap or out of my Brita filter is just as good as the quality, whatever the heck they're selling me. And I for me, it's just a puzzle. And I think it shows the imbalance in the way we think about our relationship with the environment, that we would pay for something that's free, that cost the environment a lot, that took a lot of energy, that doesn't go away, that poisons sea life and pollutes our groundwater when it goes into local landfills, and much of it is such poor quality that the plastic itself, it may say it's recyclable, very little plastic. I mean, this is the big bruise that sadly some corporations have put upon us, the idea that these things are actually being recycled. Only a small fraction of single-use plastic gets recycled. And yet they manage, if you look on a plastic thing, whatever it is, water bottle or something from the grocery store, you'll see a recycling symbol on almost everything. And not all of it's actually recyclable. And yet companies convinced certain people to put that symbol on there. And so even those of us who think we're doing the right thing by putting them in the right bin where we think it's going to be recycled, turns out very little of it is. And so, you know, it's a challenge, and we have to rethink our relationship with these things and the idea of convenience, but mostly this idea that there is, in a way, there isn't in a way, when, and by that I mean, you can't throw something away. It doesn't go away. It just goes somewhere else. And then what happens to it? So, you know, great. Talking about climate solutions, who knew? I didn't. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the world after China and the United States. Think of that for a minute. Now, I compost at home. I have a vegetable garden that I love and nurture. I put all my food waste, not meat, but all other food waste, back into my garden. From the earth it came, from back to the earth it goes. But I had no idea that food waste was such a huge source of greenhouse gas emissions. There's an easy individual action that's really meaningful. And Americans, I mean, imagine this, we throw away 40% of the food we grow. 40%. Right? That would never happen in a poor country, right? You would never grow, you know, there is food waste in the developing world, largely because of refrigeration or transportation issues. But nobody buys food and throws it away. We buy food, shove it in the ever larger refrigerators that we've purchased. And when we find the moldy grapes in the back, you know, go, oh, well, and throw it in the trash. We have to rethink these relationships. So some of the waste is occurring, we buy it, but don't consume it. And then other greenhouse gas emissions are coming from, we bought it, we didn't consume it, and we threw it in the trash. And so you'll find a great article and video on composting. And I love, you know, I'm always looking for new voices, new messages, new messengers to help reach beyond the choir on these big environmental challenges. And one of my favorite partners with Outrider right now is Brent Suter, the star pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers. And he writes articles for us. He reaches an audience I wouldn't reach. You know, I don't know much about baseball, and I wouldn't be a credible voice to a sports audience, but Brent is. And he just did an article for us on composting and the things he's learned during COVID in learning how to grow his own garden, teaching his child about pollinators, composting his food waste, having a more plant-based diet. And these individual actions are important. At the end of the day, they're not going to address at the scale necessary to abate climate change. We need much more than that, but individual action does matter, and it creates cultural norms. It helps us rethink how we see the environment. And I really encourage people to go to our website and watch Brent Suter talk about what he learned about composting. See our food waste is we have a video, food waste is the dumbest environmental problem, right? And it really is. And then we have a really good one on plastics as well.
I have a question here. Well, I guess a couple questions here, but the first one was if electric cars become very popular and throughout, what about the batteries, like disposing of those?
I don't know a lot about electric car batteries. I think I know that there's been enormous progress in creating longer lives for those. For most of them are lithium ion at the moment, I believe. But I don't know anything. I mean, we use a lot of batteries now. I wonder, how many people put their batteries in the trash? Do they, I mean, whether it's a flashlight battery or any other battery, um, properly disposing of batteries is, something we need to do. I can't tell you how long those car batteries last. I know they're lasting longer and longer, but I honestly don't know that much about it.
I have another question here. Let's see, have you heard of cradle to cradle manufacturing?
Yes,
I
yes,
certainly
yeah.
haven't heard.
Well, a lot of people, cradle to grave, some people call it, and yes, it's been talked about for decades, and the real issue is what you're measuring and how you measure it, and it gets pretty complicated. So if it was interesting, a friend of mine had done an analysis of um, eating lamb from raised in New Zealand versus in the United States. It can get pretty complicated because the transportation emission, it depends on what you're measuring, right? So if you're measuring greenhouse gas emissions only, you might get one answer. And in that case, New Zealand grass-fed lamb actually has a lower greenhouse gas footprint because, as it turns out, shipping high volumes of material by sea emits less greenhouse gas emissions than shipping it across country by a diesel truck that isn't fuel efficient. So really, it matters what you're measuring. It matters who's measuring it. It matters what your verification methodology is, and it does get complicated.
Are there any other questions for Tia? There's been some good ones.
Yeah, it's been great. When you guys are done, I get to go have dinner. I've tucked Mom away in the other room, and she's watching TV, and I held off dinner so I could join you guys. I'm really grateful for the chance to show the film and talk to you. I really appreciate your work, Gay, and so it's been lovely to be here with you guys.
Oh, well, thank you so very much. I hope people will go to Outrider, and I know that they've had a lot of really good programs lately. The one about nuclear.
Yes, we also work on nuclear weapons proliferation.
Yeah.
Two issues: addressing climate change and reducing the threat of nuclear weapons. And there's fabulous content on both. So we have core curriculum, in essence, and for a teacher or a librarian, the core curriculum sites for the nuclear weapons and climate change are really fabulous. The climate change stuff was done in collaboration with the University of Wisconsin Center for Climatic Research at the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. But then you'll see a tab called Outrider Post. And if you go there, that you'll find all these climate solutions videos where we address food waste and plastics, and where you'll find the film and Brent Suter stories, and really surprising things about how to build that brighter future. And these are big, daunting, challenging issues. And our goal is to help regular people who aren't experts in these issues better understand them, and also see that they really do have the power to make a difference. Individual action really does matter, and you start through understanding and knowledge, and then take that and make meaning of it, and take actions that make sense to you and your family and your neighbors and your friends. And this is how we make change.
Thank you so very much. You've got a lot of thank yous in the chat. I guess we'll end it here. And hey, have a good night, everybody. And remember, you can do your part.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm grateful. Bye-bye.